Hi, I'm Greg Dell, joined by attorneys Alexander Palomara and Stephen Jessup, and we're going to talk about the standard disability insurance company denials. And specifically, guys, I want to get into um, the common reasons that you see as to why the standard denies claimants mostly. And then also we'll talk about their denial letters, what we usually see, and give some opinions about standard. So Alex, when someone calls you and they say, hey, I've been denied by standard, what comes to your mind initially, even before you've even seen the denial letter?
I know. Whenever I hear about a standard case, a potential case, I'm going to ask the potential for the copy of the denial letter. It's the first thing I need to see. I know it's going to be a pretty thorough denial letter. When you deal with other insurance companies like New York Life or Hartford, denials can be 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages on average. Maybe 5 pages tops. When I get a standard, they're typically pretty long because I think standard does a more thorough job of denying the claim, and they put a lot of information into that denial letter, a lot of the summaries that they had conducted, a lot of the reviews they had conducted, and they probably do more reviews on average than most insurance companies. So they do a pretty good job of denying their cases, but there's always holes in any case. If a person comes to me and says, I'm disabled, and the insurance company is saying you're not disabled, there has to be an error or an issue with the reviews they're relying upon. Just because they're doing more reviews than the average insurance company doesn't mean those reviews are more reliable than the average insurance company. They're typically using the same companies that the other insurance companies use. Maybe they're just using more of those reviews, but you have to get a copy of those denial letters. You have to go through them very thoroughly because they're very thorough, and we have to poke holes in those denials.
I think, Stephen, what I've seen from standard, and we've deposed their people many times and handled thousands of standard disability insurance denials, is that they're a smaller company. They're within the top 10, kind of close, but they're not even close to the biggest companies. And in terms of the biggest companies doing billions of dollars, they're down in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of a type company. But because of that, they don't have the volume also, because bigger money, bigger premiums means they sell more policies. Standard doesn't sell as much. But probably regardless of how much they sold, they have a better managed claims department. They seem to have less turnover. They seem to have higher qualifications for the employees that they're going to hire to review claims. And then also, from what we know from seeing claims handling manuals, which are things that are available and disclosed in cases, that they're structured in such a way where they have vocational consultants, they have medical teams, and they do focus on specialties. With that, I think that they're leaning towards saying, we're really going to try to look at this claim and evaluate it and use the right people. Whereas many other companies, let's just evaluate it, do the bare minimum that we have to do. That's not the way standard's looking. And in a way, when someone gets denied, it makes it maybe a little bit more difficult for someone to get that denial reversed, because standard has actually legitimately tried to do it the right way. That being said, though, what's the most common reasons that you see for a standard denial?
I think the most common is always going to go back to something that they feel in medical isn't indicative of restrictions and limitations. Like most insurance companies, they're generally not going to contest what the diagnosis is, right? It does happen, but generally speaking, they'll say, yes, you have X, Y, or Z condition. We've reviewed it through these doctors, you had these doctors review everything, and we don't think it rises to a level of medical impairment, right? There's not enough evidence in the records to support restrictions and limitations. So it's usually some type of, insufficiency of the medical. That's going to be, form the base of any denial. And then from there, they kind of compound on it with regards to various other things. Like, Alex was saying that they do more reviews. They do a more thorough job. And I think that's part and parcel of what you were saying earlier, is standard also writes individual policies. So the way that they review the group policies is kind of the same way they do it. They're looking to see if there is a rationale to approve. So the reviews are very thorough. And unlike other insurance companies, they spend more time on the initial review, where, like Alex has said with New York Life, Hartford, a lot of times first denials, very little information about the denial. It's almost like they're waiting to see if you bother to appeal, and then they're going to do all their actual reviews. Standard gets out ahead of it in trying to set up the claim if it's going to be approved or if it's going to be denied. There's not much more after you submit an appeal like you see with other companies that they add. So you got to always look at the insufficiency of the medical records, or even, they may find that there are restrictions and limitations. However, based on their vocational analysis, those restrictions and limitations that you do have wouldn't prevent you from being able to do, your job duties.
Alex, in these policies, the language is very important, from the definition of disability to how occupation's defined, and then there's also limitations in the policies. Is there anything specific with the standard that you see that causes multiple denials that you often review?
I mean, like most group disability insurance policies, typically they'll have a definition of disability that changes after a certain amount of time. Under most of these group policies that standard issues, there's a definition of disability for the first 2 years that says if you can't do your own occupation, then you qualify for benefits. And then after 2 years, it becomes a little bit more difficult to qualify, and it's either any gainful occupation or some type of, or any occupation standard. That opens the door for them to say, after 2 years of benefits, they can deny your claim because it's a higher standard to reach. So a lot of denials come at that 2-year mark. Also, standard has a typical mental health 24-month limitation. They only pay benefits under these group policies for 24 months for mental health conditions, and they have a more thorough of a policy when it comes to such as subjective symptom limitation claims, or they actually limit a lot of different type of medical conditions that other insurance companies don't. Whether it's what's the word, like back issues,
neuromuscular,
thank you, stuff like that. They'll limit it to 2 years. They'll limit to
like fibromyalgia,
all that stuff that's subjective. They love to limit it. Post-viral, we were talking about that earlier. They limit it to 2 years. They do their best job limiting all those claims. So they have a lot of more limiting language in their policies than the typical disability group policies that you'll see with New York Life or Hartford or Unum or whoever else. So their policies are way more thorough than most insurance companies.
And Stephen, what other tools are available to Standard that you see them use besides just their internal medical reviews in order to deny claims?
I mean, I've seen them send out for IMEs, especially if there is some disagreement. They're one of the companies on group policies, I will say, is more likely if there's a disagreement between your doctors and their doctors to do an IME. Kind of like, we're going to let this doctor make the decision. Now, IMEs come with, all that, risk or whatever with that, but they are willing to do those. You still will see video surveillance, not nearly as much as we used to see prior to COVID. Now you're seeing more just online searches. And that's not only looking at your social media, that's like doing complete background searches. If we get a claim file, you'll see they'll go through, either LexisNexis or something, get a detailed background report. And they still do like to do interviews with the client, be it on phone or field interviews. So they will, also employ all these kind of outside things to kind of, I think, round out the picture as to, the claim.
Well, it was good to just, on the surface, touch on some of these reasons that we see for denials. Obviously, we help people with the appeal if they've been denied and a lawsuit if they've lost the appeal. We have other videos that people can check out, obviously, where we give tips to help prevent a denial. But the purpose here was to talk about, give an opinion about the standard, and let everyone know that if they've been denied, feel free to reach out to any of you guys, any of our lawyers. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we'll always provide you with a free initial phone consultation.